And we're ready to begin. Good evening, good morning, and good day. On behalf of Venerable Master Jiru and the community at Mid-America Buddhist Association, also known as MABA, welcome to an evening with Reverend Heng. Our moderator tonight is Danyeye, one of the lay teachers here at MABA. Videos of past talks may be found at our YouTube channel, MABA Augusta. Thank you for joining us. We're happy you're here. Without further ado, Danyeye.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone from around the U.S. and the world to an evening with Reverend Heng. I'm going to go through the bio very quickly because of our delay. So please allow me to introduce Venerable Heng to you briefly. He was ordained as a Buddhist bhikkhu at the City of 10,000 Buddhists in 1976 and became a senior male monastic disciple of Chen Master Xuanhua. He is perhaps best known for his pilgrimage with a companion traveling up the California Coast Highway from South Pasadena to Ukiah, which is 2 hours by car north of San Francisco. They did this taking 3 steps and 1 full bow to the ground repeatedly, a distance of over 800 miles in 2 years and 6 months. This practice is called San Bu Yi Bai. During this pilgrimage for 3 years and for the 3 years following that, he observed a strict vow of silence. The 2 monastics on the pilgrimage dedicated their efforts to world peace. Heng earned his MA in Oriental Languages at the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD in religion from Graduate Theological Union, Berkeley, California. He's also fluent in Mandarin Chinese. Reverend Heng currently serves as director of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. He's author of The Highway to Dharma Letters to Buddhist Pilgrims Write to Their Teacher. He now lives part-time in the Gold Coast Dharma Realm Monastery in Australia, about 54 miles or 87 kilometers south of Brisbane, where he's coming to us from today. There's much more we could say, but for now, I wish to turn the program over to Reverend Heng. I apologize for doing it so rapidly, but we want to have you have as much time as possible. Please, you're welcome to begin.
As they say here in Australia, no worries, mate. So, Jiru Fa Shi, Amitofo Fo, Kong Shi Fa Shi, Amitofo Fo. Dharma friends, thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. And boy, the slideshow of the grounds at MABA that preceded this talk was just beautiful. That's very impressive campus, and I hope to see it in person someday. To get us going, and by the way, tech troubles are just part of the game, and you know that happens. So that's the way we look at it. And we're glad that all of you stayed with us, and welcome. I see in our I looked at the participants list, and we have friends from all over the world. Somebody is coming in from Beijing right this minute. And we also have half a dozen friends from my translation seminar that meets weekly at online and at City of 10,000 Buddhas. So welcome everybody. To begin, I would like to share my screen. First of all, I'll bring this up. We're going to do a semi-formal start here. And, okay, share my screen. And I'm going to, there we go. All right. I'm going to put out a line, and you all are free to repeat that line if you'd like. We'll, in this way, invoke spiritual presence. So here we go. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Your turn. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo Sadanto Suchedoye Ulahadi Samyao Samputoshe. Namo Sadanto Suchedoye Ulahadi Samyao Samputoshe. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Alrighty, now that would be the time that we would launch into the talk ordinarily, but I wanted to add a piece of our opening protocol here, which I've learned in Australia, which I find very graceful and something that I'm definitely, when I'm back in California, I'm going to introduce to every one of my public talks, and that's called Acknowledgement of Country. And it goes like this. We say, and mind you, I'm in the Gold Coast of Queensland. I'm in southeastern Queensland, Australia. We say, the Kombumerri people of the Ugambe language group practice their spiritual connections to land, to living beings, and to all creation in this location for tens of thousands of years. Today, we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of this land. We acknowledge them with gratitude as we share this land today, with sorrow for the costs of that sharing, and with hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. We acknowledge their wisdom and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge all First Nations peoples whose sovereignty was never ceded. Alrighty, now when I get back to California, that's going to be the Miwok and the Pomo and the Ohlone. I'm part of that group, that Europeans who came later. So I think probably in Missouri there might be a corresponding acknowledgement of country that becomes a way of bringing wisdom to the center. Alrighty, well, thanks again, and I'm delighted to see the communities of Dharma Realm Buddhist Association and the communities of Maba come together. I've known Jiru Fasher, your founder, for years. We first met at the North American Monastic Sangha Conference, which was, at that point, was an annual event, bringing all of the monastics from all the different traditions together for a week. And boy, the pictures of those robes together, the red and the brown and the black and the gray and the gold, it was just wonderful, inspiring, as the Buddha Dharma comes to the West. So today, my talk is going to be in English primarily. So I will be using some Mandarin, and I'm going to be also sharing my screen and letting you all look at some notes that I've made for the talk. What I want to talk about is how, I guess the downbeat of the talk is that the Buddha Dharma is coming to the West. It's coming to the world, here to Australia as well. And I started as a Zen person. I'm of that age, and I know there are some of us on the call who are also of that age, Don and others, who are, we were raised in the 60s and 70s, and our first encounter with anything Buddhist came through language pretty much. My first encounter, I was a junior high student, this was in the 60s, and my dad was a voracious reader, and he had a bedside table where he would put the latest book he was reading, and they would stack up. And I would sneak down, when my dad went to work, I would sneak down and look at the latest book, and then, you know, sneak it and then put it back before he knew that I had read it. And the one that caught my attention was called the Dharma Bums. Jack Kerouac, indeed. And there on the cover was the word Dharma. It's the first time I'd heard that. And then inside was Jaffe Ryder, who of course we know was Gary Snyder. And then we discovered Gary Snyder's poetry and his translations of the Mad Monk Han Shanzi, his poetry. And step by step, bit by bit, the Dharma, the name Vajra Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Lotus Sutra, kind of came into consciousness, came into awareness. But for me, back then, it was all Zazen. Shikantaza, they said in Japan, Zhiguan Dazuo, right? You only pay attention to your sitting. And Dogen Zenji was a big name for us. And we read the books, we read Philip Kaplow's Three Pillars of Zen, and we read, what else? We read The Way of Zen, Alan Watts, and D.T. Suzuki's translations, The Traditions of a Zen Buddhist Monk, et cetera, et cetera. And this was it. This was Buddhism as far as we knew. And now we've encountered this incredible phenomenon of mindfulness that is available to people worldwide now. And for those folks, Buddhism and meditation are synonymous. That's it. However, what I learned when I met Master Shren Hua, Gold Mountain Monastery, I'll skip the personal details bit because I want to get to the topic about Buddhists translating Mahayana sutras. What I discovered when I got to Gold Mountain Monastery in San Francisco was the full-blown Hanchuan Fojiao, Mahayana, from the Chinese tradition. The Hanchuan Chinese tradition gives us what are called the Wuzong, the five schools. And the five schools was kind of hinted at in Zen, if you poked around Zen, but you had to dig harder to find some of them. And one of them was absent. Which one was that? That was Pure Land, the devotional side. If you look at the five schools in terms of yogas, Jingdu Zong, the Pure Land school, was Bhakti yoga, devotion. What is devotion? What's the Pure Land school? It's reciting sacred names. So when you go to Buddhist Asia, if you go to China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, Japan, people do meditate, but not very much. What do they do instead? They recite the Buddha's name. They hold beads. My beads are here. And they recite Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo. Devotional Buddhism. That's a story that was spoken without request at one point in the Buddha's teaching career. Okay? Devotion. It's not limited to Amitabha, the name of the Buddha Amitabha and his 48 vows, but focuses largely. There's also Guanyin Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, Guanshiyin Pusa. There's also Di Zangwang Pusa, and there's other divinities within the Buddhist tradition whose the basic practice focuses on reciting their names. All right, there's that. Well, then there's everybody's favorite, Chan, the Chanzong. That's the second of the five schools. Chanzong is seated meditation. You either do Vipassana Guan or you do Shamatha Zhi Guan as you develop your Chan Samadhi. Well, what else? Those are the two that are the most well known. There's also this mantra school, Mantrayana, known inside the tradition as Mi Zong, the secret school. And the Mantrayana focuses on that part of the Buddha's teaching that focuses on things like Om Mani Padme Hum. We know that one, right? And what else? Well, there's the longest of the Mahayana mantras called the Shurangama, the Leng Yen Zhou. Oh, if you're a monastic in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, you recite that every single day. And lay people are encouraged to devote themselves to memorizing and reciting the Leng Yen Zhou. It takes 15 minutes. We just did a piece of it. Namo Sadanto Suche Doye Ola Hadi Samya Sampatoshya. That's the opening of the Shurangama mantra. All right, well, that Shurangama mantra is contained in the Shurangama Sutra, but we'll get there in a minute. All right, that's 3. What about number 4? Well, numerically, the least popular, you could say, or the least studied would be the Vinaya school. That's the tradition that looks at the organizing principles of the Sangha, the Buddhist community. The Vinaya school observes the precepts and all of the moral precepts and all of their wonderful structuring of the life of a deep cultivator. And mind you, the Pure Land school, the Chan school, the Mantrayana, the Mantra school, and the Vinaya school are all completely valid, wonderful practices that will carry you all the way back to your own nature. You can go through those doorways to awakening all the way home, right? Any one of those. It's rare to find opportunities to study some of the more
I found this on the web.
The more exotic, the Mantrayana, the Vinaya school. There are not many places where those are taught, so your opportunities to study them are limited. Now, we got 4, but what about that last one? That last one is probably the least known, maybe a rival with the Vinaya school, the precept school for the least known. But let me tell a story to introduce that last one. I got to Gold Mountain Monastery in 1973. I took refuge and became an official disciple of the Buddha in 1973. So that's pushing 50 years now. When I got to Gold Mountain Monastery, here was Master Xuanhua, Shang Shen Xiahua Lao He Shang. And outside the Gold Mountain Monastery in San Francisco on 15th Street in the Mission District was a converted mattress factory, red brick mattress factory, built back in the early 20th century. And outside the windows on the street, as you got to looking from the outside to the front of Gold Mountain Monastery, there were 4 huge Chinese characters painted. Hua Yan Fa Hui. Hua Yan Fa Hui. Flower Garland Dharma Assembly. What was it? The Avatamsaka Sutra was advertised from the front of the building. What was the Avatamsaka Sutra? Who knew, right? Why was that so important? Well, when you went in, what you discovered was Master Xuanhua, who was carrying a Chan school lineage, spent 90 minutes of every night explaining Mahayana sutras. Every single night of the world, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. On Thursdays, he didn't explain. It was students' night. We took over, and then he would come listen. So you very quickly got the impression that this Chan monk, this Zen master, really valued books, the words the Buddha spoke. And what a shock, what a surprise to hear from inside the Chinese Buddhist tradition this 5th school called Jiaozong, the Sutra School. And what we learned was that the Buddha spent 49 years explaining Dharma. What was it about? Well, often in the backstory where they came from, the Buddha would be walking through India. This is our historical Buddha. And he would meet a situation, and he would, in order to solve a problem, let's say 2 kingdoms are warring over water rights, which may become a reality in our future as climate change desiccates the planet. So the Buddha would sit down and arbitrate a solution. And his disciples would say, oh, you remember when Shifu explained and prevented a war by describing who owned the water and who didn't own who could use the water? That was really good. I remember that. Let's write that down later, right? So then the Buddha would be invited to the palace, and the king would feed him and his monks, and then request Dharma, and the Buddha would explain a principle for the enlightenment of the king and his court, and the disciples would go, yeah, that was a really good one. And then occasionally, the Buddha would say, it is time now to explain the deep teachings, the deeper lore. And that would be a major sutra such as the Shurangama Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, and others. So by the time the Buddha entered nirvana, he had explained different levels of teachings for 49 years. And interestingly, there's a lot of details that pop out once you start to dig into this tradition. One of them is that the Buddha said, don't write it down. It was an oral tradition. Why? Why wouldn't the Buddha write it down? Well, for one, most people in India at the time were agrarian. They were farmers. They had never had the opportunity to study any written language. And the written languages available were Prakrits. Pali came later and Sanskrit came later. So if nobody can read, why write? Why write it down? Number two, those who could read tended to be in the very strict Indian caste system, tended to be the priest caste, the Brahmins, who memorized the Vedas and who owned the books, and who, if the Buddha wrote his sutras down, would become the possessions of a minority, a tiny minority of the Indian population. And the Buddha spoke Dharma to end suffering. He taught what are called 84,000 methods for transforming affliction. It's for the folks. He spoke Dharma for us, not for some priest caste who will own that wisdom and you have to go through them to get to the Dharma. The Buddha said, no, actually, the Dharma comes from within, so I'll teach you how to access your inner wisdom and your compassion and how to cultivate blessings. So listen carefully and pass it on orally. So that was interesting. Only after the Buddha entered nirvana and the disciples met in these colloquies, in these councils, were the sutras finally written down. Interesting. So, written down finally, original Indian languages, the Dharma came east. It got to China, it got to Vietnam, it got to Korea, it got to Japan, and then north to Tibet, to Nepal, then south, the Pali-based tradition, the Theravada tradition, came to Sri Lanka, then to Thailand and Burma and Cambodia, Laos, and the Theravada countries. And at a certain point, let's look at China, for example, the various pilgrims came carrying what had been written down in India, often in scrolls and written in Indic languages, and they collected them. And we got to what is called the Tripitaka, the three baskets, what are called the three baskets in the 12 divisions of sutras. So when the Han-Chuan, when the Chinese tradition got to the Tang Dynasty, there pretty much most of the translation was done in China in that first 500-600 years before the Tang Dynasty, which was the 7th to the 10th centuries in China. So in that time, we have a really mature, ripe, sophisticated collection of what the Buddha taught. Of those texts, between my Chan experience, my Zen experience in Japan, and meeting Gold Mountain, I was a grad student. And what was I looking at? I was looking at the scholastic approach to understanding Buddhist texts. I was a scholar in Durant Hall up in the East Asian Library at UC Berkeley, and I was marveling over these incredible texts that talked about, let's say, the perfection of wisdom, prajna paramita. We've all heard that word. And wow, here were these ancients, these men and women of wisdom who studied and translated prajna paramita. And when I met Master Shren Hua, I had the feeling that I had just met an ancient walking out of the sutras that I was studying with a magnifying glass in the East Asian Library. Here was a man who had been trained in the Jiaozhong, in the teaching school, the sutra school of the Chinese Mahayana, and who wanted nothing more than to share it with us. Did I really want to, once I became a monk, I thought, I don't want to go back to school. But then I met how Master Hua presented the sutras, and it was something I wanted to do a lot. And now to this day, after 46, close to 47 years as a monk, I do meditate, I do recite mantras, I do recite the Buddha's name, I follow the Vinaya as best I can, but my life and my work is focused on the Buddha's teachings, on the sutras, particularly, who knew, the Avatamsaka Sutra. When I first got to the Mission District and saw Gold Mountain, Hua Yan Fa Hui, 4 characters on top of the, written on the glass in huge Hanzi, it was like, had no idea. And now I've bowed to that sutra, I've carried it on my person, I've translated it, and I explain it every week for the last 30-some years. So I had no idea that my life would be focused on the Buddha's teachings. But today I wanted to share with everybody, just to let you know that if you are a meditator, if you recite the Buddha's name, that's wonderful. But let me tell you, there's more. So let's pick one out. Let's pick out how does it work? So my first Don mentioned in my introduction that I did a pilgrimage at one point in my career and training as a young monk. And one of the things that Master Hua instructed myself and my colleague, Bhikshu Heng Chao, was, he said, "You're not going to get enlightened on this trip," he said. "However," he said, "I want you to write." He said, "Every day you need to write. You need to write a journal." He says, "If you don't eat one day, that's not important, but you must write in your journal every day. If you don't get dressed one morning, doesn't matter as much, but you must write every day." And he said, what will count in the future is when the principles of the sutra that you study correspond to the events that happen to you on the highway in your daily life. When the events of the day illustrate the principles of the sutra, he says, that's when it will count. And it's like, okay, Shifu. And so then he said, okay, here's how you bow. When you bow, Namo Da Fang Guangfo Hua Yan Jing, you recite the name of the sutra, and while you're bowing, you say, Wang Shi So Zao Zhu E Ye, Jie You Wu Shi Tan Chen Chi, Cong Shen Yu Yi Zhi So Sheng, Yi Qie Wo Jin Jie Chan Hui. You say, for all the harmful things I've done with my body, speech, and mind, from beginningless greed, anger, and stupidity, through lifetimes without number, to this very day, I now repent and I vow to change entirely. And he says, then you stand up. Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pu Sa. So you had to learn to do it quick, because the bow, you're not going to be down there for 30 seconds. So I would bow, Namo Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing, recite Wang Shi So Da Zhu Ye, and then Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Pu Sa. 1, 2, 3 steps. So with every step, I recited the name of the sutra, and I had a backpack, and I carried the sutra on a backpack, and a small edition of it, little volumes on my back. And then at night, we lived in a 1957 Plymouth station wagon on the highway, because you weren't allowed to camp on the Pacific Coast Highway. So we spent the night in a car parked behind a billboard or in a grove of trees somewhere. And then we had in the car a large edition of the Avatamsaka Sutra, and we brought it out and studied it at night. So bowing to the sutra, reciting its name, carried on my back, investigating at night, and then every day writing. We would bow for an hour and then sit for 20 minutes and write in a journal and try to integrate the lessons of the sutra into the experiences that were happening on the highway around us. I want to share one. I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. And give me a second here. Here we go. This is, everybody see that, I hope? This is a verse from the Avatamsaka Sutra. It's from chapter 40. It's the last chapter of the sutra. And Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, whose name is Puxian Pusa, he explains 10 methods that he considers to be the keys to the cultivation of the entire sutra, he says. So it's, of those 10, number 4 is called Chanhui Yejang, repenting of karmic obstacles and reforming, renewing, right? Renewal. And so here is that verse that explains that text, and it goes, Wang Shi so zao zhu e ye, jie you wu shi tan shan shi, cong shen yu yi zhi so sheng, yi che wo jin jie chan hui. Okay, so I was reciting that in Chinese when I bowed, but I thought, not everybody's going to be interested in learning Chinese. We need to translate that into English. So here's what I came up with, and I put it to a banjo tune, which I'd share with everybody. And this was a result of Master Hua's encouraging us to write in our journals. And it's powerful in Chinese, but I think it's powerful in English too, and it's the value of translation. For all the harmful things I've done, with my body, speech, and mind, from beginning's greed, anger and stupidity, through lifetimes without number, to this very day, I now reflect and I vow to change entirely. For all the harmful things I've done, with my body, speech, and mind, from beginningless greed, anger and stupidity, through lifetimes without number, to this very day, I now reflect and I bow to change entirely. For all the harmful things I've done, with my body, speech, and mind, from beginningless greed, anger and stupidity, through lifetimes without number, to this very day, I now reflect and I vow to change entirely. I now reflect and I vow to change entirely. So, one of the new awarenesses coming from my first encounter with the Jiaozong was the idea that the Buddha spoke. So, did the Buddha speak Sanskrit? He probably spoke a Prakrit. We're not quite sure what language he spoke. one of the Indic languages. And at some point, Chinese Buddhists wanted to find out what the Buddha said, so there had to be this translation process from Sanskrit or Pali or Sogdian or Uyghur. Yeah, the Uyghur was a trade route land. So they translated into Chinese. And this was over a period of centuries, mind you. Bit by bit, the texts came to China, and then from China to Korea, Korea to Japan, to Vietnam, etc. So I'll speak to the Chinese East Asian experience, the Tibetan and Nepalese experience. I'm not as versed in, so I'll let someone else explain that. So what I discovered as I learned from Master Hua, was what I assumed that this is what all Chinese Buddhist monks did when they studied the teaching school. Only when I got to Asia did I discover it was not so. Master Hua was in fact a reformer. He was a critic of the Chinese Buddhist approach to sutras. He said, we've been too selfish. He said, when you go to any hotel room around the world and you open the drawer of the bedside table, what do you find? You find the Gideon Bible. And he said, how come, because there's so many Buddhist texts, how come when you pull open that drawer you don't find the Diamond Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, in the local language? He said, well, it's because we've been too lazy. We've been too content with our own riches, and we haven't made the Bodhi resolve to share them with the world. So he says, we need to do that now. And I might add that Master Hua was not alone in that. There's another similar vow by the Japanese industrialist Yehan Numata, who has done a wonderful job of encouraging the translation of Buddhist texts. So anyway, what I learned at UC Berkeley in the Durant Hall Library was, in the canon, in the Buddhist canon, there are 1,600 separate texts that at the end of are called Jing, have that word sutra. 1,600 texts were collected. And of those 1,600, some nobody pays attention to. Some are lost. They just have the title. Some are only very brief. But in the Mahayana tradition, there are several that are the most well-read, the most beloved. As I mentioned, Lotus Sutra, Shurangama Sutra, Avatamsaka are called the three main treasures of the Mahayana. The flower garland, Avatamsaka, the Lotus Sutra, the Fa Jing, the Sudharma Pundarika it's called, and then the Shurangama is pretty much what we call the Shurangama. Now, what I discovered when I got to Asia was that the practice of explaining sutras is rare. Doesn't happen often. There are historical reasons for that, but when it is, what monks and nuns largely do is they go directly to the second basket of the Tripitaka, the three baskets. One is sutras, 1,600. The other is the commentaries. Most monks and nuns go to the commentaries. The third basket is the Vinaya, the rules for organizing the community. But there's this custom that says in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, you don't directly touch the sutras. Why? Well, one reason. If you explain one word wrong, you fall into the hells. 讲错一句会下地狱. 你不怕吗? You know, it's like, what? Truly, people said that. They said, if you explain one word wrong, you're going to fall into the hells. Who dares? You know, it's like Master Hua says, I'm willing. He said, if it means I don't get to read the sutras, I'll fall into the hells. He said, absolutely, that is a wrong view propagated by people who didn't want to lecture on sutras, or people who touched the commentaries and got lost in these voluminous, massive commentaries and never got to the words of the Buddha. What Master Hua taught us was let the Buddha's voice be heard. Do not listen to those bogus taboos that somehow sutras are dangerous to you, that somehow engaging with a sutra is going to send your soul to hell or is going to, eat up your blessings because what? Well, you happen to put the sutra on a table where there was a newspaper, and all of these crazy taboos. We call them 莫名其妙的规矩. We call them, bogus rules, crazy rules that people invent in order to have power over others. So I guarantee you run into these in the Chinese Buddhist community, and there are reasons why people don't dare touch the sutras. How strange, right? Okay, well, taboos. There are taboos around the Holy Bible as well, so around religious texts. So that's one. There is this custom of prioritizing shastras. Master Hua said, I want you to hear the Buddha's voice. 90 minutes of every night, we listen to the Buddha's voice in the sutras. He said, don't be afraid. All right? So that's one taboo declassified. Right? That word has new power these days. So we're declassifying taboos. There's another teaching that grew up around, there are reasons why we don't know about the sutras, which was the idea that somehow they are the highest philosophy and nobody understands them. Particularly the Avatamsaka Sutra has that reputation that somehow it's only for philosophers. And I guarantee that is not the case. What I discovered when I listened to the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Huayan Fa Hui advertised on the front of Gold Mountain Monastery, was the Bodhisattva path, was these humans who had an incredible heart of kindness and compassion, who say things like, living beings are really sad. We living beings are suffering. We're just attached to the wrong views. We meet good teachers and run the other way. We don't believe the things we hear, and we cling to our habits that are hurting ourselves. How sad. I need to wake these living beings up. That's what you find in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Bodhisattva path, 52 stages of ways to cultivate the Bodhisattva path. Let me, so let's say we decide that we're going to, pick up, we're going to try to translate some of this sutra stuff. What do we run into? We run into Buddhist code. Buddhist code. Decoding the Dharma has become the work of our translation groups. And what is it? Here's the idea that the Chinese language has this genius for taking complicated ideas and crystallizing them down into the real essentials, what are called 四字成语, 4-character phrases. And these little gems of wisdom can be passed on because they're economic, they're short, they hold these profound wisdom nuggets of Dharma, and they're easy to transmit. So these phrases, 4-character idioms, were coined 1,600 years ago, but to this day they come down, and it's called 文字般若, literary prajna. So anybody a fan of loose leaf tea? Anybody here tea drinkers? Chinese tea, not tea bags, right? Chinese tea comes in little BBs, little nurdles of tea, tightly wrapped. The leaves are, wrapped around each other, and you pour hot water on them, and bit by bit they relax, and you get this entire leaf, and the beverage is really fragrant, right? Really tasty. I've got some oolong tea in my cup right this minute. And it began this afternoon with these little tiny tea balls, tea leaves, individual leaves, loose leaf leaves. So what happens if you pour cold water on those tightly wrapped tea leaves? The answer is nothing much. Doesn't taste good, right? So the problem, one of the reasons why sutras are less known, we don't know about sutras, is because they got passed down often in 4-character idioms that have not been decoded. So how do we decode what's the hot water in my analogy that brings out the flavor? Well, let's take a look. What do you see right here? Got this one? Here, let's take a look at this one. There we go. 上乘佛道下化众生. What is this? This is what the Chinese Buddhists will tell you if you ask them, 什么叫菩提心? What is the Bodhi resolve? What is this wonderful Puti Xin? Is that it? Puti Xin? Okay, there we go. The Bodhi resolve, Puti is Bodhi, the Indian Sanskrit word, and the Bodhi resolve is said to be the real heart of the Bodhisattva. It is the Bodhi resolve is the thing that, there we go, thank you, son, the thing that takes us from seeker of liberation to Bodhisattva, the awakened being. And if you ask traditionally a Chinese Buddhist, what is the Bodhi resolve, the Puti Xin? They will say, here it is, Shang Cheng Fo Dao Xia Hua Zhong Sheng. So before we decode the Dharma, we would translate this and say, okay, let's take a look. Above, accomplish Buddha path. Below, teach or change living multitude-born beings. So the Chinglish, the Chinese English, Chinese words pasted on top of English syntax would say, okay, above accomplish Buddha path, below teach living beings. That's the Bodhi resolve. And you go, okay. So the Buddha's up there somewhere, and living beings are somewhere down below, and there's this gap in between, and this sounds pretty foreign, right? So when we decode the Dharma, and my best example of how to decode the Dharma is actually to cultivate your own your own relationship with these principles. What you get instead is, it is the secret, the magic decoder ring, not directional, but temporal. Shang is not above. The Buddha isn't up in the heavens like some deity in a theistic religion. Instead, Shang means ultimately. My ultimate goal is to realize complete wisdom of the Buddha, which is my inherent potential. And immediately, the way to do that, to uncover that wisdom, is to come to grips with the living beings of my own nature, my greed, my anger, my delusion, my pride, my doubts, and teach them. That is the Bodhi resolve. So it's not above and below, Shang, Xia. It is 究竟. Ultimately, my goal is to become a Buddha, and 当下, immediately the way to do that is to get to work with my own living beings. That is the Bodhi resolve. So another way to say it, what is my potential? My potential is for complete perfect wisdom. Everybody listening today has that potential. And the way to do it, what's keeping me from that, is all the stuff inside me, all my false thoughts, all my delusions, all my attachments, all my opinions, all my desires, all my afflictions. Together it's called wuming, ignorance, right? So when we decode the Dharma, suddenly it's like, oh, okay. Here we go. My ultimate potential is perfect wisdom. The way to realize it is to change my own bad habits and faults. Now, that's a lot of words, but that is decoding the Dharma. I told you these are nuggets, right? These are crystals of wisdom. And when you put hot water of practice and insight and chew on it, you have to chew on it to make it get the flavor. You get, yeah, that's the Bodhi resolve. Interesting. Okay, so that's the work of translation. Now, I need to check in. Don, how long are we going? Francesca, how long are we going?
We go till 9, so we have another half hour, sir.
Another half hour. Do I get a 15-minute bonus for the 15 minutes we waited at this time?
I thought it was about 12, but yes, you may, if you'd like, sir.
Everybody, please, everybody, you can, we're going to add a little bit of time. So we're going, I got another, let's say 40 minutes. So folks who have to go, I apologize if we run a little over, but I have so much I want to share that I want to make sure I get the ideas across here. Okay, so we heard about, oh, let's see, did I do the wrong puti? Okay, thank you. I got to correct that. Master Hua would laugh at me and say, what did you do? 怎么搞的? I got the wrong pu. Hold on here. Just a moment. Come back. Pu Tishin. Luckily, see, I have people who keep me honest here. There we go. Pu Tishin. That's it right there. The wrong pu. Thank you for my team. We have quite a few of our translation team on the call today. All right. Great. So why don't we know more about the Buddha's teachings? Well, they haven't been translated. And let's update it. When you get to the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, they say that if the Buddha taught for 49 years, and the Avatamsaka Sutra, they said, was explained immediately after his awakening under the Bodhi tree. You can get into the real nitty-gritty of the teaching school. They divide it, they say the Wu Shi Ba Jiao, the 5 periods of teaching and the 8 different schools that came out. So I won't do that today, but they say the Avatamsaka was spoken immediately under the Bodhi tree. So the Buddha his wisdom had just unfurled, and he saw everything between heaven and earth. And he explained it. They say, Qi Tu Zhou Hui, 7 places, 9 different occasions, twice in 2 places, for bodhisattvas and for devas who could understand it. Still, there were no disciples at that point. He had just awoken and just awakened. And so the Avatamsaka is the Buddha's vision of the cosmos. And he explains it very clearly. When the translations make it to the physics department of UC Berkeley, the men and women who are pretty much considered to be the ones who will tell humanity what the universe is made of, physicists, right? Laboratory physics. What is it made of? How does it work? Is it a bubble? We use a bubble chamber to get quantum mechanics to work, string theory, whatever. When they get the Avatamsaka Sutra, they go, why haven't we seen this before? And the answer is, it hasn't been translated. Thomas Cleary, bless his heart, and Shambhala Publishing have translated the entirety of the Avatamsaka Sutra, and it's available, the whole thing. It came without commentary. We are translating Master Hua's 9 years of explaining the Avatamsaka Sutra until it was done with commentary. And we're trying hard to put it into real English. So when we know that the physicists go, that's fascinating, because why? At the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, where I live half the year, we have an ongoing conversation with physicists from UC Berkeley. The first thing that we discovered was we had to negotiate a language. So physics talks about events. Is an event the same thing as a Dharma, small d Dharma? Interesting. So the first thing we did was we got a teapot. Here I have a thermos. So we took a teapot, not a thermos, and we set the teapot down and described it from a Dharma point of view and from a quantum physics point of view. And getting a language to where we could actually talk to each other was a challenge and very exciting. But then we presented the Avatamsaka Sutras descriptions of Chong Chong Wu Jin, Yuan Yong Wu Ai, interpenetrating without obstruction and mutually replicating without end. And the physicist said, wow, when was this spoken? You know, so we don't want to assume that this is some abstract, long ago and far away. It's as present as a repentance verse that when you chant it, it brings up all kinds of insights about yourself. And that's Samantabhadra Bodhisattva's power tool for cleaning out the nooks and crannies of my ignorance and my delusion, right? Or it's a description of the universe that physicists get excited about because it seems to be replicated in their best experiments, and yet the Buddha connected it to his own nature. You didn't need expensive equipment to replicate that experiment. So, okay, now we heard about reasons why more people do not know about the treasury of Mahayana Sutras. How come? How come more people don't know? And we heard about the idea of taboos, that if you explain it wrong, you'll fall into the hells. Nope, can that one. That it's all philosophy, you can't understand. In fact, it's not. It's largely compassion, pragmatic instructions for how to practice. Other people say, oh, it's all Sanskrit, too much Sanskrit. Puti, we just looked at, I got the characters for puti wrong, right? That you have to know Sanskrit. Not the case. We are busy translating it now. So what else is there? Well, there's the problem of Chinglish, which is to say Chinese English, and I'm sure there's a Vietlish too, and probably a Hanlish for Korean. It's the quality of the translation is limited to the knowledge of English of the translators and the knowledge of the new target language, the Chinese that we're using. So it works best to have groups endeavor to translate together. We began translating Master Hua's explanation of the Mahayana Sutras on the spot back in the 1970s when he was explaining the texts. So to this day, it's an ongoing process. I'm going to share with everybody some links. I would like you to have my talk be a springboard, perhaps. Let's go out to BuddhistTexts.org. I'll hit that. I'm going to pop it in the chat. Everybody check the chat if you can. Everybody know how to do that? Find the chat. Go to BuddhistTexts.org. Okay, we're going to do that right now. And when you get to BuddhistTexts.org, close that, you discover, go here, you discover the work of the Buddhist Text Translation Society, which has endeavored for, these going on to 50 years now, let me show you. 50 years of translating and publishing Buddhist texts in the West. Established in 1970 at Buddhist Lecture Hall in San Francisco. And we have the guidelines for translators, training opportunities, translation projects ongoing that you can join, and the Avatamsaka Sutra translation project, which is, we meet every week, and that's our group that are online right this minute. If you're interested in joining, please email info@buddhisttext.org. And I really hope folks take try it. It's 12:30 or is it, it's 1 o'clock now in Pacific time. That would be 11 a.m. Central time for all of you, on Mondays. Monday mornings for you, 11 a.m. Take a noon break. We go usually 90 minutes, and we're going slowly through. We're now in chapter 5, retranslating. And it's fun. Adults having fun with the Dharma. So there's that. Okay, what else is there? We have a bookstore. All of these translations. And notice, so look at our languages. We've got Zhongwen, of course. We have Spanish, Espanol. We have Viet. We've got numerous other languages, Francais, Italiano, Nihongo. And notice up here, free books. I want you to discover the Shurangama Sutra that we would like to give to you today. Download it right here. This is our most substantial English translation of an entire sutra explained by Master Hua. This is the retranslation, the second version. Took 10 years with a committee working through. It's available to download as a PDF. You can also certainly go out and buy it if you care to, but we would like you to have it. And with that, I know people are saying, how do I get it? How do I get it? I'll show you. Here we go. With this translation of the Shurangama Sutra, you get a real sense. Here it is in the chat. Okay, click on that link. It'll take you right there. And you'll get a sense of the scope of Master Hua's translation project and what we're trying to do with it. What we who followed him, and it's a large group of folks who have been working since 1970 when it was founded, are doing to make the Buddha's words available to you. There's a commentary. It's a wonderful, wonderful text. Now, there's more, however. What do they say? Wait, there's more. Okay, free English books. I would also like I'd like to give to everybody a copy of Meditation Handbook. This is a text that I co-authored with another disciple of Master Hua, Jose, and it's filling a gap, which was a clear, simple, illustrated introduction to Mahayana meditation that includes, of course, vipassana, shamatha, guanxiang, contemplations, and some of the background, such as diet and exercise and things like that. So that's, you click it, download, get a PDF right there. So we would like to give you those. All right? You're welcome. But this is the home of the Buddhist Text Translation Society. We're always coming up with new books. There's lots and lots of Chinese. 很多很多中文的版本，玄化上人所讲的佛经，还有论啊，还有其他的佛教三字经。There's lots and lots of Chinese texts available for readers of the Chinese tradition. Master Hua's commentaries on Mahayana Sutras. All right. What else? What else have we got? I would like folks to know as well about Dharma Realm Buddhist University. Pop this into the chat box. There we go. One of the things, this is not text translation per se, but one of the things that Master Hua completely emphasized for us was education. And we have schools, we have elementary, secondary, and university, higher education. Dharma Realm Buddhist University, fully accredited with the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, WASC. So I'm just going to point to that and encourage people to go check that out. Go to the chat box, copy it quickly so you can look for yourself. There's amazing programs available, philosophy of education, classics. We've got lots and lots available for you, university to glance, tours, etc. So do take a look at Dharma Realm Buddhist University. Furthermore, if you are interested in online sutra lectures, we have a lot available. We've been doing it for a while. We have a YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel is called Dharma Realm Live. I put it in the chat box there. You can grab that. I'll take you out there now. Go to, let's see, I think I copied the whole thing there. Right, there we go. There, I am one of the lecturers, sutra lecturers from the Dharma Realm Buddhist Association. I've been doing this for a while. Here's Dharma Realm Live. Let's look at the videos. Here we go. There's daily ceremonies. There's Avatamsaka Sutra currently explaining what is called the Yemo Gongdian Jizang Ping. Praises in a palace of the Suyama heaven, right here, ascending to a palace, praises to the palace. There is Master Jinfo explaining the Wuliang Yi Jing, Wuliang Shou Jing, 就是说. Then we have, let's see, playlists. This is what we want. Right, ascending to a palace of Suyama heaven. We have the whole 10 stages chapter of the Avatamsaka, chapter 26. We've got Martin Verhoeven explaining pieces of the Avatamsaka Sutra. We have Bhikkhu Bodhi teaching the Theravada Abhidharma. We have Medicine Master Sutra, etc., etc. Various other lectures. Bhikshuni Heng is also a major lecturer on Dharma Realm Live. There you go. Do check it out. The thing that happens when I explain on, if you want to catch it live, this is YouTube, but you can also catch it live, is I have we have volunteers who volunteer to translate into Mandarin and Vietnamese. So if you would prefer to listen in Vietnamese, you can definitely do that. If you would prefer to listen in Mandarin, it's a better Mandarin than mine. It's real Chinese, and you can enjoy the Avatamsaka Sutra in Mandarin. That's every week, ongoing. Okay, we got, but wait, there's more, as they say. Hold on. Also, park that for a minute. We've got a lecture series right now on what's called the Song of Enlightenment, Zhang Dao Ge. I'll post that. Here we go, in the chat box. This is a wonderful text. There we go. That's how to, if you're curious and you'd like to listen in. I lecture on, so if you're in Maba, or you're related in Maba and you're in the Midwest, you're in Central Time, I lecture at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, so that's 11 a.m. your time, and it's every week, and we're going through, it's on Zoom, okay? We ask you to register, and we'll send you the link to find it. I'm going through the Chinese Zhang Dao Ge, Song of Awakening, and we're putting it into music. So let's see here. Should we do it? Here we go. Oops. There we go. All right. Analyzing verses. There we go. And here we are. Here's what it sounds like. We start, let's see, 3 p.m. Central Time, not 11 a.m. Is it 3 p.m.? Oh, we're going the wrong way. I told you wrong. Yeah, see, my team keeps me honest. Thank you, Chanyu. Okay, it's mid-afternoon for you all. I was subtracting hours. The Central Time is ahead. That's right. All right. So here we go. Let's pick one that was last week. 孙发财灭功的莫不由此心里事. Mind you, this is not a sutra. This is a song. It's a 歌. Okay, let's try scrolling here. Sorry about that. All right. We'll Let's do this one. Okay, Song of Enlightenment, Tang Dynasty, awakened monk. His name is Xuanjue. He was the monk from Yongjia, but in China they name the monks after places, so famous monks. So he becomes Yongjia Dashi, Song of Awakening, Song of Enlightenment. And it's 63 verses. And it's in the Chan school. It's just celebrated because Master Yongjia points directly to the mind ground, Xin Di Faman, the mind ground Dharma door. And he says things like, and we play Master Hua's chanting of it to begin. We get to hear Shifu chanting it. And I'll approximate Shifu's version of it. He goes, He Da Kong Bo Yin Guo Mang Mang Dang Dang Zhao Yang Huo Qi You Zhao Kong Bing Yi Ran Han Ru Bi Ni Er Tuo Huo. Okay? Shifu was singing my bad approximation of that. So we wanted to sing it in English. So we came up with 2 tunes. One, we can't decide because why? Zhengdao goes 63 verses. Some of the verses are just in your face, just exhorting. Do this. No nonsense. Master Yongjia doesn't suffer fools, right? Some of them are very sweet and very emotive and evocative of monks in the wilderness, living in the forest and discovering the wonders of the nature. So we have 2 different melodies. So we go like this. Some folks stick to emptiness, deny cause and effect. They run amok, predictably, and call a sorry fate. Ignore existence, you'll go wrong by clinging to the void. Like one who leaps into a fire, escaping from a flood. Some verses don't work with that Sunday hymn. That's a Sunday go to church hymn. That's a Methodist hymn setting. Some folks prefer, some verses call for something that we're calling the high and lonesome sound. It's, in the ridge, in the Blue Ridge, high up on the mountains. Some folks stick to emptiness, deny cause and effect. They run amok, predictably, and call a sorry fate. Ignore existence, you'll go wrong by clinging to the void. Like one who leaps into a fire, escaping from a flood. So we set it to, it's a song, right? This is that phase of Chinese Buddhist literature called Ge Qu. It's a song. So we analyze it this way. We say the themes warns against attaching to emptiness or existence or other states, warning against denying cause and effect, alerting us to ways you can go wrong after initial success. This is advice for intermediate meditators, right? Then we look at the terms. We have Kong, cause and effect, Qi, Yo, etc. Then we reverse engineer the verse back into prose. Should you one day in your meditation experience a state of emptiness, which is a sign of progress along the path towards samadhi, and you claim that cause and effect no longer applies to you because everything is empty, you have just attached to an extreme view. Midway towards success in meditation, you will have taken the first step down a slippery slope that will inevitably lead to disaster. By attaching to an extreme view and leaving the ultimate truth at the middle way, no matter whether you calculate your reality on radical existence instead of radical emptiness, you make the same fundamental mistake on either side of the duality. You jump out of the frying pan into the fire. You assume the opposite of existence is a safe refuge, but either horn of the dilemma will bring you closer to your Neither horn of the dilemma will bring you closer to your original mind and realization of the way. So that's how we look into the Zhengdao Ge, verse by verse by verse, week after week. And for Chan sitters, Zen sitters, it's rich. It's just, and Master Yongjia, week after week, gives you something brand new. It's just, it's just gems, total Dharma gems. So if you would like to take part, we would love to have you do that. And finally, the last thing I'm going to share before I quit, what do they say? I'm a preacher, right? Stop me before I preach again, right? So hold on here. I would like folks to look for dharmaradio.org. Share my screen right here. Hold on. Copy that out. This is, people wonder why I'm playing a banjo. Why do I play guitar? Monks aren't supposed to do that, aren't they? So, okay, there we go. Dharma Radio. This is, Master Hua said, when you share the Dharma, he said, you, pointing to me, he said, you're never going to be a Chinese Buddhist monk. Don't try to be. He said, you live in your culture. You have to use everything that you know to spread the Dharma to people with whom you share that culture. He said, don't try to be a Chinese monk. He said, in the future, a monk who could play guitar would be very useful in spreading the Dharma, he said. So here we are at Dharma Radio, Stories and Songs of Awakening. There's good karma music. Do a good deed, and we will send you, for the price of your good deed, your choice of music, including 3 songs by a Franciscan monk, Father Cyprian Concilio. He's the prior of New Camaldoli Buddhist Monastery. So these are all my musical creations: Dharma Radio, Songs for Awakening, Stories for Awakening, Paramita, American Buddhist folk songs. We have Brian Conroy, telling stories, and Father Cyprian Concilio. You do a good deed, you type it in, then you also get to read the stories of friends who have done good deeds, which are just wonderful good news stories. So there's also music and podcasts talking about what it was like to be a teacher, a student of Master Hsuan Hua, and etc. So that's all in Dharma Radio. Alrighty, I am done, and I would like to talk about behind me. This is the Heart Sutra. It's Guanyin Pusa. Isn't that a nice Guanyin? The Heart Sutra is a vow by a Taiwanese Buddhist nun who promised to. Here we go. I'll show you what it looks like. There they are. Who promised to ink out 100 or 200 or 300 complete Heart Sutras. So it's Boro Bolo Amido Shinjing Guanzi Zai Pusa Xingshan Boro Bolo Amido Shi, done in calligraphy. So we had a lovely Guanyin scroll, and we flanked Guanyin with the Heart Sutra. Okay, let's see. It's now officially time to end, but I've got a 10-minute buffer in which we can ask some questions.
If people would please type in the chat box, and Reverend Hungsher he's very tech savvy. He can read the questions. If you just type to everyone, thank you. While we're waiting, Danyeye, would you talk, or is it out of place for us to talk about Blue Heron Translation Group and some of the difficulties we've had?
Let me just not go in that direction, but thank you for that prompt. I do have a question. So I'll start the questioning off by asking our venerable teacher, where does Tian Tai fit within the schools, because when you were talking about the schools, I kept waiting for Tiantai and Master Zhi and
Yep.
all of those good folks. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask that question.
So great question. When you go to, I mentioned 5 schools to start, right? There's Chan, Pure Land, Vinaya, Mantras, and then Jiao Zong, the teaching, quote, that's a Chinglish translation, the teaching school. You could say the scholastic school, or the school that looks at texts. When you take the next step into the teaching school, it divides into 2. One is Tiantai, and one is Xianshou. Tiantai is focuses largely on the Lotus Sutra, Fa Hua Jing, and it became a school because why? People liked the teachings of several monks who lived in Zhejiang province around the Mount Tiantai, Tiantai Shan. One, the most revered, is a monk called Zhi Zhizhe, the great master, the wise one, and he learned from Huiyuan and others, but he left behind the important part of Tiantai was that Buddhism had been in China at that time for about 5 centuries, and this was the first time that Chinese monks and nuns and laity had their own system. And they say, we are confident in the Chinese approach to the Buddha's teachings. We are not entirely reliant on Indian texts. So that's the first time that there was a unique and independent Chinese expression of the Mahayana. And so Tiantai is very important. And Master Hua was the last generation of Chinese Buddhist monks thoroughly schooled in the traditional Tiantai. So the Tiantai, for example, if you pick up one of Master Hua's commentaries from Buddhist Text Translation Society, before he begins every sutra, he goes through the traditional Tiantai breakdown of approach to texts, but he doesn't stop there. Because there are many people in the Chinese, why is the teaching school the least popular? Dry and boring, deadly dull. And so Master Hua said, don't stop there. You need sutras, he said. Sutras are a mirror that show you your true face. Sutras are a map that take you back to your original nature. Sutras are a blueprint that show you how to build a house of Bodhi out of your life. You can't do without them for even a moment, he said. So there you go, Don.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's see here. Do you have a lot of readers in Western society? A lot of readers. Does Buddhist text have a lot of readers? No, we don't. Why? We want to keep it going. There we go. So why not? We're not unique in that way. If you look at, you can actually go to Amazon, the world's largest bookstore, which is a double-edged sword. You can do an index to see what are the most popular forms of printed literature. So as a category, what do you all suppose are the most popular forms of literature? I'll give you a clue. Cookbooks. Cookbooks, best-selling. So if you want to make a lot of money, write a cookbook. So if you go on down the list, of course, there's fiction, and there's, the Bible, the Holy Bible, and all. Down at the very bottom, like a 0.02% are religious books in total. Of those religious books, the Buddhist percentage is minuscule. More and more, mind you, since mindfulness and the lockdown of COVID pandemic and all, but not much. So if the question is, do you have a lot of readers? If you pick up a book, we have one more. Okay, let's see here. All righty. Yeah. Don, what else? More questions? What have you got?
So I don't know if there are more questions in the chat or not. So maybe the people are still digesting So much material that you've given us.
I have a sulfur crested cockatoo sitting on my railing right outside. I live in the Queensland bush, surrounded by birds. A beautiful, large white bird who is patiently waiting for me to get with the bird seed already. So
Yes.
if we don't have any, let's see here. Yeah. So thank you for the invitation to become part of the Maba community tonight. That was terrific, and I do hope we can have our Sangha communities merge in the future. Why not? We, like everybody, moved online during the pandemic, and probably will, a lot of the fact that, let's see here, I'm going to take a look. Our group, we have 5 friends who came in Chinese from China in our talk today. So my Song of Enlightenment lecture is almost half from Buddhist Asia, from China, from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia. And there's another large group from Vietnam, which is just wonderful. That wasn't possible before Zoom made it possible. Sam wants to know, what is a good sutra to start with? Sixth Patriarch, Dharma Jewel Platform Sutra. Start there. And that's where I started. That's where many monks in China started. Let's see here. BuddhistText.org. I'm going out. Hold on here. Share my screen. Six Patriarch Sutra is a really wonderful place to start. Bookstore, sutra text with commentary. We will. Should I search for it, or where do we?
I noticed the link was broken, so I found it though. You got it there.
Yeah. It's 50 Skanda Demons of the Shurangama. Here it is right there. Okay, this is a shameless plug, but I'm gonna paste it in. Okay, for Sam and everybody else who wants to know where to start, that's a great place to start right there. Master Hua's commentary brings it to life as only a Chan master can. There it is right there.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Where did the books ship out of? Or is this
Ukiah or San Francisco?
Okay.
Or Burlingame maybe. And down by the San Francisco airport, you can get it on Kindle. It reads really well on Kindle.
There's another question. Just scroll up a little bit from Jiali.
Okay, Jiali, good start to start with. Some people think only Theravada sutras are real from the Buddha. How about others, including the Huayan Sutra? Okay, I chose not to go there, but since you asked, I will. The reason being, the reason why I didn't want to go there was because to do it justice, I need more time than I have. But there is a view, there's an early view that has now been discredited, that Pali-based teachings are an earlier strain of what the Buddha taught, and that the Mahayana teachings came later historically, and therefore the Buddha never spoke them. And there's to my mind, a harmful and I would say unwise perspective happening in some parts of Taiwan in particular, that says the only true teachings of the Dharma are Pali-based, that all Mahayana is an aberration and was created by some disciples later, and they really do believe that and teach that, and so they study Pali, and anything that came out of China has to be false, they say. The Buddha never spoke it. I'm really suspicious. I spend a lot of time with interfaith, talking to non-Buddhists and people who have no interest in becoming a Buddhist. They're profound Muslims or Jews or Sikhs or Hindus or atheists or pagans. And I find much more goodwill
this on the web.
Thank you. My watch is telling me. I found so much more kindness in friends who are willing to take Buddhism on its own terms than I find with this very hard-edged, very nasty exclusivity kind of wanting to eliminate half of the Buddhist tradition community that began in Taiwan but has spread around the world. This idea that Pali teachings are the only true Dharma. So that kind of exclusiveness I don't like in Christianity either, and I don't like it in Islam either. I don't like it in Buddhism. So that we'll point to it and let you know that you will discover people out there who say that. And in fact, when you look at from philology, you study the language, you discover that the Mahayana has been around just as long, that the teachings were coterminous. They were being taught, they coexisted. Just like right now, on the call today, there are people who come from the Theravada tradition. There are people who come from Zen. In the Buddha's lifetime, when he was teaching, there were people who had different potentials in the Buddha's audience. They heard different things. He taught differently to different capacities. If you have a gallon of water and you pour it on grass, you'll drown it. If you have a gallon of water and pour it on a redwood, it's not enough. So the Dharma is the same. We each drink according to our capacity. So, that's the last question. I think we'll hang. If you invite me back, we'll answer more questions. How's that? What I would like.
We'll definitely invite you back.
All right, lovely. What I would like to do is help us transfer merit, and the way we're doing transferring merit these days, is to use a mantra from the Mahayana tradition. This is Mahayana Buddhism's power tool for illness of all kinds, including COVID. This comes from Medicine Buddha. Yao Shi Guanding Zhenyan. Monks and nuns who do morning ceremony chant what are called the 10 small mantras, Shi Xiao Zhou. And number 6 is called Yao Shi Guanding Zhenyan, this mantra. We have a Sanskrit version, which is very nice. And the idea is, this is the heart of the Medicine Buddha Sutra. And there's a lot of energy here. When I go out into, Australia is now heavily saturated with COVID, the Omicron. And when I go out, I put this in my heart and I chant it. And it gives me a feeling of well-being. And it also allows me to project that into whatever community I'm walking through. So I feel like I'm helping, push the virus back, transform the virus. We use this for huixiang. So I would like everybody to read along with me and join. If you'd like to chant it, those who know it already, please chant along. Maybe you want to mute your mic while you do that. But with this, we make a wish. All of the goodness that comes from our gathering today on Maba's dime to look into the sutras of the Mahayana, we're creating goodness. And we share that goodness with a wish. Would you like to extinguish some of the fires that are burning up the West? Would you like to pour cold water on the aggressive militants that are taking a land war into Asia, into Europe? Whatever you would like to, if you want to chase COVID back to nothing, please make a wish and transfer that merit. However you would like to share your merit. And after this, we will be done. So here we go. Please make that wish. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tagyata Om Vaisaje Vaisaje Vaisajya Samu Samudgate Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagataaya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Aisaji Aisaji Aisaja Samudgate Swaha. One more time. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharajaya Tathagataaya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Aisaji Aisaji Aisaja Samudgate Swaha. May it be so. May all be well. 阿弥陀佛，济如法师，感恩，阿弥陀佛。
Thank you,
Bye,
Master
everybody.
Bashu. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. It was a delight.
Yes.
Bye bye.